This is a hot take. Hello, I am Anna, and today I'm answering your questions, the good old-fashioned YouTube Q&A. This one is social work themed because many of you asked social work type questions. So if it's okay with you, I was figuring we would do it in sections. It's after work tonight, so I don't know if I'm sitting down and filming the whole thing right now or if we'll kind of do it throughout the night. But section number 1, answering your social work related questions. Section number 2, answering your non-social work related, more just like me related questions. And then section number 3 will be social work advice coming from someone who, I don't know, knows a little something. Take all my advice with a grain of salt. Quick spiel in case this is your first video of mine. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a medical social worker working at a children's hospital right now. I graduated with my MSW in 2022, graduated with my BSW a year prior to that. Going backwards in time, I guess. I've gotten my associate license in social work. That was vlogged while we did it. The whole entire grad school experience is vlogged. The last couple of semesters of my BSW was vlogged and it's all on this channel. My first job post-grad, which was at a jail, is vlogged all on this channel. And then I quit that job and transitioned into this new one last May. So that's a little bit of my social work journey, just like in super short. Question number 1. I'm currently a freshman in college, strongly considering getting a BSW. When did you realize you wanted to get a BSW? Kind of goes along with another one. I'm planning on majoring in social work and becoming a clinical social worker. My question is, what made you decide that you wanted to get into social work? So the decision to pursue a BSW happened for me about 2 weeks before I went to college. I did not apply to college with the intention of getting a social work degree. I never really had thought about a social work degree. I didn't specifically think that was something that I did not want. I just did not think about it. It was not on my kind of roster of like future possible jobs. Growing up, I never really knew what I wanted to do. Like I never had a dream goal of something that I wanted to do. I was someone who was like, oh, I want to help people or like be around people at least in my future profession, but I didn't have a set idea of what that would look like. I remember in the beginning of high school, I took an AP Human Geography class and I was so intrigued by just like different cultures and how people live in this world and how people interact with each other and interact with this world in this world. And I do remember when I took that class, I was like, I want to do something that relates to this. Like this is so interesting to me. Didn't connect it to social work then. That's like a reflection looking back where I was like, maybe that should have given a little sign. But I didn't know what social work was. So whenever I was a senior in high school and was graduating and applying to colleges, I applied as a biology major and I was thinking I would be pre-pharmacy. Part of me thought like maybe possibly pre-med, just like a little bit part of me thought of that, but I was thinking like pre-pharmacy, and for me it was like I can use kind of science-y, it's like a stable career in the future, and I was set in that plan, but I never felt like alive about that plan, if that makes any kind of sense. Like I was 18, of course I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but that was the plan whenever I was going to college. I even remember the internship that I did that was like non-social work related between high school and college. One of my fellow interns was a social work major at that time, and she would like say she was majoring in social work, and I remember not giving two thoughts about it. I didn't even give a second thought about it. I did not know what it was, and I just like was not interested. It just like was not a thought in my mind. Fast forward, so like 2 weeks before moving states for college, I go on this volunteer trip to Guatemala. It was to a home called Aldea de Esperanza, or Village of Hope, and they work with child survivors of severe abuse and trafficking. It was some heavy stuff. While we were at that home, we played sometimes with the kids, but really we were there to do more like kind of grunt work to just like help the home run more, like be helpful. So I painted walls while I was there, just like little projects like that. But I remember being so impressed by this home for the children because their ethics were so strong about doing what was best for the kids and not exploiting the kids, not exploiting their stories. And that was something that I feel like when you see volunteer trips, when you see charities sometimes or organizations, that was something that had rubbed me the wrong way. Just like growing up seeing it was seeing how kids' stories can get exploited. Kids can get exploited for a cause or for raising money, whatever it may be. So this home had such strict rules about things that you are not allowed to say to our kids. And they were very blunt and direct about their expectations for people while they were in the home. For instance, like do not take pictures of these kids' faces. Don't share these kids' specific stories like on any kind of social media. They protected their own, which I was seeing and I was like, there are some strong ethics here. And it like really got me thinking. And so moving forward in that week, you can kind of think of it as like a group home, but it was in Guatemala, but like our version of a group home. There was one night that week whenever the parents of children, if their parents were still around, because most of the kids were not adoptable, their parents were still around in the picture. It just wasn't safe for the kids to live with their parents. But they had a night where parents could come to visit, could come to play with the kids. Lots of parents brought gifts, and it was super special. Of the entire, maybe like 60 kids at this home, there were 2 that were adoptable, meaning that their parents just were not around. I don't know why, but their parents were not around. Their social worker, who I didn't know that she was their social worker at the time, their social worker came for them to that night, to that parent night. She brought them the same kind of gifts that other kids' parents were bringing them. She hung out with them the entire night. And I remember being so worried before that night because I was like, what happens on parents' night for the kids without the parents? And then the social worker comes up and does something out of her way that means so much for those kids. And so I remember asking a worker at the home, I was like, who is that that's with those kids? Because I knew that they didn't have parents around. And the language barrier was a bit there. I didn't speak Spanish at all whenever I went. And so I think this was like a translation error, but it ended up being kind of cute. But I asked, like, who is that with those kids? And the worker responded, and she was like, oh, that's their best friend. And I was like, that is so cute. I later learned that that was their social worker. That was my introduction to social work in a way that like intrigued me. Obviously, that little image is not what social work is. Like, it's not always just like bringing kids happy meals. But it stuck out to me that those kids had someone that was there for them, that was gonna spend time with them, and that was like caring about their well-being in the absence of their parents. And I felt honestly so fulfilled that week, just like seeing the work that was being done at that home. And it opened my eyes to the fact that there is a way to help people that is backed by research and that is ethical and that prioritizes the needs of the people you're serving, you know, empowering, all of that. So when I got back home, it was like the fact that my previous major plan, I just like was kind of bland. I wasn't feeling so super passionate about it, combined with the week that I had just spent. And I remember I emailed, I'm not even positive who she was, at the University of Alabama School of Social Work. Her name was Mary. I remember that. I emailed her and I was like, hi, this is who I am. I'm an entering freshman. This is my current plan. However, I'm looking at maybe majoring in social work instead. I would love to just like learn some information about what that might look like, if that's a possibility for me to switch my major right now. And she emailed back honestly so quickly and gave me so much beneficial information. She like looked at all of the credits I was coming in with and basically gave me like a 4-year plan where she was like, if you want to major in social work, this is what your time at college could look like. Like, here are some minors that might be of interest to you. Like, really just laid it out in a way that was so accessible. I remember emailing her back and I was like, perfect, I am going to change my major to social work. And so I did. And so I had to change all of my classes. It was this whole thing right before school started. But by the time I actually began as a freshman in college, I was already a social work major. Still didn't really know how vast the field was, anything like that. That would come later. But that is how I chose to pursue a BSW. What was your very first job and how did or didn't those skills translate into the field that you're in now? The very first job I ever had was a checker at a grocery store. Which honestly, having customer service experience, I feel like got me used to speaking to strangers. And also, again, I didn't know I wanted to be a social worker then, but I also remember kind of lighting up whenever I could have like a connection with a stranger that just made both of our days like 1% better. And you know, as you're checking groceries, like it wasn't like we were always chatting about something deep, but honestly, I liked that job because so many people came through the line and it gave me a chance to like make people feel seen as they were coming into the grocery store. I feel like that's so deep for checking people's groceries. But I think that that is a skill that has translated into social work from my grocery store job. And then also just the like actual work ethic part of things, like going from a first job where it was like, okay, I wanted to perform well. I wanted to learn my job and do my job well. I feel like all of that has translated too, but that's probably more of just like a generic job type thing than specifically social work. Now this is a hard hitter because I got a lot of questions very much related to each other. How did you work on your self-confidence when you first started talking to clients? Any tips on gaining confidence as a new social worker? Do you have any tips on how to not be too hard on oneself? I guess the last one I'm kind of like lumping in there even though it could be different. I think that confidence comes and that you have to trust that confidence will come. I think sometimes if you focus on not feeling confident, you almost start to be disappointed in yourself for not feeling confident, like as if not feeling confident is a flaw instead of like a hesitation, if that makes sense at all. I think there are lots of different sources that a lack of confidence can come from, whether it's not feeling confident in like subject matter, maybe not feeling confident in what you're talking about. Both of those can be addressed by learning more. So whenever you're going to talk to clients, sometimes it can be helpful to think to yourself like, okay, am I, introducing a service or something like that? Take a second to review what you're introducing, what you're going to talk with them about. You don't have to like memorize something, but if that helps you feel better going into an interaction, take a second to review. It's okay. If confidence comes from maybe thinking that they will perceive you as too new or too young or not knowledgeable, I think something that can help, even though it is hard to enact, is to kind of just, okay, then what? That thought. Like if you're headed into an interaction and you catch yourself thinking, oh no, what if they think that I'm not a good social worker? Think to yourself like, okay, then what? Just in the sense of, is their perception of you going to change the job that you're doing for them? No, it shouldn't. Does their perception of you change your value as a social worker? No. Does their perception of you change the knowledge that you bring to the field? No. Does their perception of you change your value as a person? No. And I get that there's a difference between telling yourself that and believing that, but beginning to tell yourself that can help you start to begin to believe that. I get lots of comments lots of times that are like impressed with how confident I can sometimes present myself, or even being very young to the field. Like, I have just over 1 year of social work experience. Like, I'm very much a baby social worker, but I'll get comments that are like, you are so established in the field, like you were so impressive. Not to toot my own horn, hear all the great things people say about me. No, but I say that because people's perception of me in that way, like the way that I present myself, has not always matched to the confidence that I feel. And I bring that up to say that you can feel super unconfident, but that doesn't mean necessarily that other people are seeing you that way too. So that's something. Something that can be really helpful is supervision with a trusted supervisor, being able to reflect on interactions with clients and not be too hard on yourself, but be able to pick out like weaknesses or things that you think you could do better next time, because by doing that work, eventually you will start to be better at those things. To this day, something that I always do is before I go and meet someone, I take a second to just like take a deep breath and regulate myself. I think it can be easy to run from one thing to the next to the next to the next, and that can start to feel very frazzled. And so something that's important is just taking a second to collect yourself. And it's okay however many times you need to do that in a day. That can be really helpful. And maybe like last little tidbit to give here is that it is okay if not every interaction you have with a client is a perfect one. Obviously you want to do the best you can, but sometimes you might stumble over your words, or you might stutter, or you might misspeak, or someone might ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. All of those things will happen, and that is okay. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't make you a worse social worker if that happens. One of my favorite responses, because people ask me things all the time that I have no idea, one of my favorite responses is, I will check in on that and I'll get back to you. You don't need to stress if someone asks you something that you don't know. Just check in on it and get back to them later. What has been the hardest part of your job? Of my current job, which if you don't know, so like I said, I'm a medical social worker working in a children's hospital. Specifically, I work on a cardiac floor. So that means children with any kind of cardiac diagnosis. Lots of those are congenital heart defects, whether they're babies or they've grown up, but they were born with a congenital heart defect. Sometimes it's like a sudden onset of something heart related that people are there for, but it is both an ICU setting and a step down unit setting. Honestly, the hardest part of my job, of this current job, I think is the fact that I do not have personal hospital experience. And that is not a requirement for doing a job. Like, you do not have to have personal experience to do a job well. But I think why that has been hard for me is because I want to empathize so bad with the clients, with the parents I'm talking to, but I have so little to like pull from in personal experience that I just very much acknowledge that I do not know what it is like for them. And so like trying my best, that's fine. I can continue to try my best. But I think that has been a really hard part where it's like, I know that this is such a hard experience. I know that this maybe is the worst time of their life. I know that they're really struggling and I don't know what that's like, but I'm trying to be here for them. And I can be there for them regardless. But it's this weird like disconnect where it's like, but I don't know what that's like. So I don't know like what exactly is helpful or like what to say in these times. And there's no perfect answer, but also part of me feels like if I had some sort of personal experience with that at all, I would know a little bit better. And that's like something that's hard to learn in school. You know, it's like you can't learn personal experience in school. And thank goodness, I'm so lucky to have like rarely been to hospitals in my life, but that has been a hard part of my job. On the scale of hard things in a job, I'm okay with this one. My previous job at the Youth Detention Center had a lot more really hard things in it. And I think that every job is going to have hard things, and it's just kind of like finding the match of hard things you can handle versus hard things you can't handle. And that'll be different for each and every person. Okay, I'm gonna take just a little break, so the setting is gonna be a little bit different when we get back, but we'll continue on the questions. Alrighty now, a few more before I go work out. What are the pros and cons of medical social work? Any tips for students looking into going into the medical social work with no medical background? So hello, you're talking to one of them who went into the medical social work field with no medical background. Starting with tips, I think, is just learning how to translate the skills that you do have into the medical field, which can be hard, but also once you do it, it can kind of click. So something that I used in my interviews coming from the justice system into the medical system, not too many similarities, especially when my roles at each were going to be very different, but something that I kept going back to of a similarity, so a strength that I had worked on in my previous job that would translate into my new job, was talking about how when someone enters the justice system, they are overwhelmed, they don't know how it works, it's a system that they would rather not be a part of and not learn how it works, works, not have the need to learn how it works, and that I was someone who could help guide them through the experience and make their experience a little bit more informed, a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more comfortable, or at least just be walking with them through it, no matter what the experience was going to be in that system. In a similar way, the medical system is one that people often don't know until they're thrown into it. People are in times of life that they would so much rather just like not be in. And by living it every day as a job, I have a role where I can help people have a bit more of an informed, knowledgeable experience navigating the healthcare system, walk with them through it. And so that was kind of a similarity that I pulled upon. So I think not letting the fact that you don't have a medical background hinder you from pursuing what you want to do in medical social work. If that is an area of a field that you want to be in, there is a reason behind that, whatever it may be. And not having medical experience does not mean that you don't have experience or skills that can be useful in a medical social work job. So going back to what are some pros and cons of medical social work, honestly, a huge pro within the field of social work, of medical social work, is that lots of times they are some of the most stable, regulated jobs. And I mean that in the sense of pay is usually pretty good as a medical social worker, or really good, depending. Lots of times you work set hours. Lots of times you won't need to be on call, especially if you're not like a super high up position. I work 8 to 4:30. Anything that needs to get done outside of those hours, there are people hired and there during those hours that can take care of it. There are evening social workers, there are weekend social workers. So like people can choose that if that's hours that they would prefer. But when you are clocked out, you are clocked out. A pro of medical social work for me personally is that I no longer have a life or death type position in my job environment. Whenever I was working with mental health and suicidality and self-injury, I was making decisions that affected people's livelihoods, ability to be alive. I didn't necessarily want that, and I don't do that anymore. There are people making those types of decisions in hospitals, holding that kind of role in hospitals. I just am not one of them, so I like that. Another pro of medical social work is that often the role is very defined. Almost everything in the hospital that needs to get done has someone to get it done. So you learn new things, but like there's a very specific, like, okay, this is the social worker's role while we're in the hospital, and like this is the case manager's role, this is the child life specialist's role, like the various different things. It's very, you don't go out of your lane too much, which can be really nice because it just then is so clear cut of like, I do this, I don't do this. This needs to get done, okay, that person can do it. The social work thing needs to get done, okay, I got this. That's really nice. That being said, in the medical field, there is 100% so much variation in where someone can be. You can be inpatient, you can be outpatient. Those are two totally different things, even though they're both medical social workers. You can be in almost basically every different kind of specialty that doctors have. Social workers can be there. So you could be dermatology, you could be neurology, you could be nephrology, you could be oncology, you could be neonatology, NICU. You could be cardiology, you could be transplant, kidney transplant, liver transplant, heart transplant, you could be gen peds. You could be rehab, inpatient rehab, outpatient rehab. Like there's so many different places you can be. So that honestly is kind of a pro, because if you want to do something in the medical field, you can find a niche that fits with you and what you want to do. So much variety in all kinds of social work jobs. How do you like your role? What are the best and worst parts? I think I kind of just touched on some best and worst parts with those pros and cons, but overall just like how I'm doing, how I'm liking my role. It is good. It is stable. It is interesting to me working outside of like my passion project. Not that there's just like one of those things, but my previous job I was so super passionate about, and I think that's why it hurt so bad too. And so it is an interesting feeling doing a job, and I like many of the tasks that I do in a day. Some of the harder parts of my role, honestly, just like full disclosure, honestly, is that sometimes it can be so tiring meeting new people every single day and having conversations every single day, all day long. Sometimes that can be just really hard for me, just because it's like, I don't know, sometimes I'm in a mood where I don't want to talk, but I don't really have that option. So that can be a hard thing. I think one of the harder things with a social work role at a hospital is that people who work with you have all different types of ideas about what you're there for, whether you should be there, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And that can just be kind of tough sometimes. If, for instance, people who are born and raised in the medical field, by that I mean like their education in the medical field, and don't understand the field of social work, which makes sense. I don't understand their field at all, totally too. But like sometimes they don't understand the difference between between like me and DFACS workers, like child protection workers. Like they don't understand that we're so super different. So like if DFACS is moving slow and getting a kid out or something, they get like the role confused, and it can be like questioning me or colleagues or something about like, well, why hasn't this kid found a foster care placement yet? And it's like, cause I don't do that. That's why I haven't done that. I don't know, people just have like lots of different ideas about like what you're there for and why you're there for, but having kind of a solid ground to go back to of like, this is my role in the hospital helps, because then you can be like, actually, sir, this is my role in the hospital. Have you ever thought about working in macro social work instead of continuing in micro social work? Yes, and I think that it'll always kind of be like a plan B in my mind. I don't know what that would look like, but I don't know when I'll want change again. If I'll want change again. I think it could be super interesting working in macro. I just don't know like what part of the field I would want to be in or what job title I would want to have in that situation. But I don't think there's too many parts of the field that are like turned off to me as like possible future opportunities. Right now, I'm not obviously looking for anything new, but just like, you know, 40 years down the line, it definitely could be a possibility. What is the biggest mistake that you have made at work? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Which is such a good question. And I have had such trouble coming up with an answer for it. And I don't know that like, I 100% have made mistakes. I don't know if I like block them out in my head, because I was thinking through it, and it's not even like there's something glaring in my mind that I'm like, oh no, like I can't tell them about that. No, like I genuinely do not know. I think it's hard because when I'm trying to think of an answer to this question, lots of the things I think about are things that I could have done more for clients. And that becomes a slippery slope, because in those instances, lots of times I do the best that I can in the work hours and resources that I'm given for clients. But like whenever I'm trying to think of an answer to this question of like, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made? I think like, oh, I didn't give that client another counseling session before they were released from juvie. Like that kind of thing. Like I should have called them in a day earlier and I didn't, and then I didn't get a chance to. Like those are the things that my mind is going to, and I think that becomes such a slippery slope, because I have to think like I did the best that I could with what I was given. I feel like realistically probably the biggest mistake that I've ever made has probably been like documentation related. In my previous job working with suicidality, self-injury, those types of things, there were lots of super specific documentation things that needed to happen. For example, if someone ever reported self-harm to me, there would be like 10 different things that then I would need to kind of like go through. Like, okay, I need to file this report, I need to do this assessment, I need to call this person, I need to make this note, like those types of things. I think those are the things that were most likely to get missed because there was so much happening at once. That being said, there was never a time that like I missed something and it became this huge drastic, oh no. Don't worry, I still have time to make mistakes in my career. I hope none are too big. I promise I'm not trying to hold out on you. I just don't have anything like juicier. Someone asked any social work related documentaries that you recommend. Honestly, no, and that is literally entirely because I don't watch any social work documentaries. I've never watched like The Tale of Gabriel Hernandez. So many of those like popular social work related documentaries I, in self-protection, just like don't watch because I don't think my heart would do well. And I like for entertainment to be like cozy and comforting. So I apologize for not having an answer to this question. I just don't watch them. And that's no shade to people who enjoy them or find entertainment in them or find that they learn from them. I just don't watch them. Did you ever get anxiety about working full-time after you graduated? Yes and no, but I also didn't work full-time right after I graduated. Right after I graduated, I worked between 29 and 39 hours a week. That was like spread among the days of the week. So I worked on weekends, I worked on holidays. Usually I'd have like a Tuesday, Wednesday off. Sometimes I wouldn't necessarily have those Tuesday, Wednesday off, but I wasn't working a full 40 hours. Coming from that irregularity that was less hours into 40 hours a week that is regular, I much prefer 40 hours a week. I also want you to think of it in the sense of when you're in college, you have class going on, placement going on, maybe a job going on, clubs going on, a lot going on. That is all jumbled throughout the week, all spread out throughout the week. Whenever you have a full-time job, it can be a lot of time, but it is so regulated in the hours that you are there, or it should be. It should be regulated in the hours that you are there, that you are clocked in, and then that's it. There's no homework on top of it. There's no classes on top of it. Again, theoretically. Don't get homework from your job. But that being said, your mental energy, it's an adjustment to get onto like that kind of more regular like 9 to 5 schedule. But I think that you will find that you will have time to fill with hobbies. Like you will probably have like more time than you're used to be like, uh-oh, what do I do with these 3 hours that I'm just sitting here? So I think it's good to be purposeful about that time, but also like have grace with yourself. I don't think, this is a hot take for some people, but I don't think working 40 hours is the worst thing in the world. I mean, I would prefer to work less, but I don't think it's like a soul-sucking number. It can be hard to do appointments and to drop things off at the post office whenever you're working business hours, because like if they're open business hours, then that is one of the times when 40 hours a week can become hard. But you got it. You'll be okay. You got it. A couple little non-social work related questions, just me related questions before we go to the social work advice section, the little like Dear Anna section. Will you start making those monthly reset videos again? Will you still be making your monthly budget videos? Yes, the video that comes up right after this one, it's planning for like the Wednesday after this one releases, but it could be the following Sunday, depending on what goes on. It's going to be one of those monthly reset videos, or it's planned to be one of those monthly reset videos. I did really like them whenever we have done them in the past. Whenever I have done them in the past and you have watched them, but whenever our life kind of like blew up in April, I kind of stopped doing them. And so I think it'll be fun to restart those again. Probably monthly, maybe monthly, if I can pull it off monthly, but I will link those so that if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go watch the old ones because they were a lot of fun. I noticed you have spiral stairs in both the current and the old apartment. Is that an Atlanta thing or a fluke? Zach and I have like an attachment to spiral staircases, so like I feel like it definitely played a role in us picking our new apartment. They're definitely not in every Atlanta apartment, but I also feel like I see a lot of them. Like whenever we were apartment hunting and stuff, I feel like we see a lot of them in Atlanta. I think part of that can be that ours is not, but a lot of like apartments have kind of like the converted factory, or they are converted factories. They're not just, it's not just for the vibes. They are like converted factories or things like that, like super old buildings. And a lot of those have spiral staircases. So then I don't know if like they just like grab the aesthetic of that and bring it into other apartments. But yeah, our old one had a spiral staircase and we loved it. And then our new one has a spiral staircase and it's so fun too. What's your favorite book you've read this year? Beartown by Frederick Bachman, and then Us Against You by Frederick Bachman. And I haven't read The Winners by Frederick Bachman, but I'm just assuming whenever I read it that it'll be a favorite one too. I've talked about them before and now it's like been a little second since I've read them, so I don't know if I can do a full great synopsis right now. Just trust me and add them to your TBR. Will you ever live stream? And I actually got quite a few recommendations whenever I'd ask. I haven't said this yet. Happy 6K subscribers, 6,000 subscribers. I love you all. But whenever I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for 6K. How should we celebrate? Quite a few people said live stream. I'm open to this. I just don't know what I would do that would be like entertaining. So I'll do some self-research too, but also if you have like an idea for a live stream, let me know. And I am so open to it. I just like have never done it before. I've always kind of wanted to go on TikTok live too, but I've never done that before either. Like I've just never done any kind of, see, the downside of live streaming is that I can't cut out whenever I do things that make me look unintelligent. These videos are so edited. You would not believe how edited these videos are. And then what YouTube channels do I watch? Let me go pull up my YouTube so I can see, and then I'll put them on the screen too. I have been loving Destiny Sidwell lately. She does book related videos. She's a booktube gal. Honestly, a lot of the videos I watch are booktubers. Along with her, Sarah Caroli. They're friends. They're cute. They have a podcast together now too, but Sarah also does book related videos. I semi-recently started watching Keegan Acton. Not like super recently, but recently, and compared to how long she's making YouTube videos. She just recently got a job, which is cool, but she's in Arizona. I'm pretty sure we're the same age. So I watch her. Oh, I watch a.bea.s. Love her. Love her. Very much recommend a.bea.s. And she, let's see, she has 96,400 subscribers and she's been sitting there for quite a long time, and I genuinely do not understand it because in my mind, a.bea.s. is like one of the very best YouTubers that I've watched, like that I've ever seen, and I do not know why she does not have more subscribers. So go check her out. You'll love her. Subscribe to her channel. Charlotte Pratt I watch. She was a senior at the University of Michigan, then she graduated and she's back in her hometown in Maine, and she just got like her first big girl job. She's cute to watch. I like her. Sarah Fisher I watch. I really enjoy her videos. She does lots of long vlogs, which I appreciate, but she is a PhD candidate studying rhetoric and composition. I think that's what RetComp stands for. She says RetComp, but I think it's rhetoric and composition. That's my guess. If it's not that, oops, she's not studying that, but I think that's what she's studying. But she lives in Indiana, and her vlogs, they talk about her research. They also just like talk about lifestyle, and I really love watching her videos too. So those are some of the lifestyle-y questions. I am going to go work out, and then later tonight we'll do the advice segment, the little Dear Anna segment. And I'm excited for it. Alrighty, advice with Anna time. I think this would be so fun. And maybe this is just like my big head speaking, but I think it would be so fun to have this be like a regular thing, or at least like another video, like a Dear Anna, you know, like they used to do like the newspaper columns. I by no means have enough life experience to be like proposing that as an idea, but I just think that would be so fun. I'd like have to find a way, I feel like, to submit things anonymously so we could get like juicy things. But anyways, our modified version of that, none of y'all said Dear Anna because I didn't tell you to, but I'm just gonna pretend that this is my little like newspaper column. Dear Anna, I'm starting a new position as a medical social worker this week. Any tips? Tip number one, there is a YouTube channel called Social Work Mastery, and she has so many videos about medical social work specifically. So I watched a lot of those. Not all of them were up when I started, but I watched the ones that she had up whenever I started. But she has things like what is medical social work, what is a typical day like, types of medical social work jobs, 9 core skills you need, how to do biopsychosocials as a medical social worker, how to read medical charts for social workers, 4 tips to master medical terminology. So she has so much good information. That is awesome. Another tip is to give yourself grace for a learning curve. I don't know the type of experience that you're coming in with, but hospitals are like their own little worlds. I guess I'm assuming you're in a hospital. You might not even be. We already talked about the variety, vastness that medical social work can be. But hospitals, clinics can be their own little worlds that just work in different ways. So give yourself grace for a learning curve. Likely there will be medical terminology you haven't heard of before. That's common. Likely there'll be processes in place that you're not familiar with. That's common. That's okay. And it's okay to take a second to learn those things. And then last tip, obviously you can't like always make a great relationship with everybody, but I just encourage you to make as many relationships as you can with different people from different disciplines across the medical field. There are so many different disciplines that work in the medical field. Social work, nurses, doctors, even within doctors, like fellows, residents, nurse practitioners, PAs, case managers. Nurses can have various different levels of what they do inside nursing. But then beyond that, there are people who keep the hospital clean. There are people who prepare hospital food. There are people who sit at the information desk. There are security. Like there's so many different people, and each of them honestly is a great opportunity to meet a cool person. But then also as a social worker, you will likely interact with so many different disciplines in a day that it's nice to have positive working relationships with those people. So I think it's very beneficial to kind of like front load on that. I mean, don't overdo it, but like when you first interact with someone, like make it be a pleasant experience. Likely you'll have to ask something of them in the future, and I just feel things are always a little bit better if you have like a nice professional working relationship going on. Dear Anna, I want to go from case management to medical social work. Any advice? I think advice will be finding what from your previous position you would want to transition into medical social work with, like what skills, what tasks you know about, what strengths you have, pulling together those with the reason that you want to go into medical social work over case management. Like there has to be something, some disconnect that you're feeling in case management that you're seeking in medical social work. And I think kind of amplifying that, being like, okay, I have all of these skills as a case manager, this experience as a case manager, but something more that I'm seeking is this part of medical social work. And I think that that can be really powerful whenever you're interviewing, writing cover letters, preparing yourself. So that's definitely a tip. I think when you do make the transition, sorting out any like role confusion can be helpful. Case managers and social work roles can sometimes overlap a little bit, crisscross a little bit. So figuring out like where you're at, what a social worker does that a case manager doesn't do, or like what tasks you may currently do as a case manager that you wouldn't do as a social worker. Just kind of getting that clear to help out with the transition while you're transitioning. But if it's something you want to do, obviously I highly encourage it. At least try it out. It could always be that you try it and then you're like, no, case management's actually where it was at, and that's okay, like to go back if you wanted to. But you won't know that unless you try out what you're seeking. Dear Anna, I am currently a preschool teacher and I'm starting school to become a school social worker. Do you think I should get a job in mental health for experience or just stay at preschool until I graduate in 2 years? I so could see a case made either way. So I think the strongest factors maybe will be the ones that affect you while you're in school, depending on your grad program. If you are comfortable at your preschool job and it wouldn't be like an additional stressor to you during grad school, it could be great to stay there, because then you have like that stability while you're starting new school and while you're completing the master's program. And even experience that's not specifically social work is valuable for future social work roles, especially if you're going to be a school social worker. Having the knowledge of what it's like to be a teacher in that setting can inform your future school social work self so much. So I don't think it's like a waste to stay at preschool, for sure. I was at preschool for a little bit, just like 2 months. I was just covering a summer. That being said, if the preschool job is one that would really be like dragging you down while you're getting your master's degree, if it's like not a great place that you're not wanting to stay, it could be fun to seek out a different job, especially if you need like more flexibility or even just like mentally need something different going on. I don't think it would be a bad idea to seek out a new job if that's what you're wanting, but I don't think you have to. So if you feel like, oh, I need to get mental health experience, I don't think you have to. I think do what you need to do to be able to get your degree, kind of like set yourself up for success, whether that's staying at the same job because that'll be successful or starting something new. I would just caution you from starting so many new things at once because that's a lot of change at once. Either way, no matter which experience you continue to get, you're gonna make a great school social worker. Good luck. You've got this. Dear Anna, what is a tip or tips you can give on memorizing all the different theories, models, etc.? Some are so similar it's confusing. I'm in my first year / semester of BSW. However, I have coming up on 20 years work experience as an allied medical worker. My best tips for memorizing those different models and theories and everything, honestly, is finding a good graphic or even like a good graph just to keep things straight. Like I remember with, what was it? Erik Erikson, whichever stages he came up with. See, now I'm too far out of school. The different like stages of morality in children, even just like developmental stages. I remember those, and I remember I would have like graphics from the textbook that I would just take pictures of on my phone, and anytime I needed clarity, just go back to those, because then it can be so easy of like, okay, this row is this stage and this row is this stage, and eventually you start to catch on to it. I also think that real world like application can be so helpful. So when you're looking at whichever stages Erik Erikson has, I can't remember, are they psychosocial? Piaget, that's another guy. Whenever you're going through those stages, I think it can be helpful to think of real world situations, whether it's like a client you've had or a family member or a friend or yourself at times, being like, okay, like I see in my 2-year-old niece that she cannot think in abstract thinking. Like, I don't know. My examples are bad. Being like, oh, my 2-year-old niece, I see this in. My coworker, I see this in. Whatever it may be. Real world application can be helpful, and also no shame in like keeping graphics, keeping notes on hand. Obviously not in tests, but whenever you're like in a field placement or in classes or in discussions, no shame in referencing back notes until you pick up on it, because it is so much at once. So your brain can't just like take the dump and you remember everything at once. So don't feel bad if you're struggling with it. It's a lot. And that's why it takes time. I'm probably a good example of like, once you're out in the field, you will probably remember the different stages and theories that you specifically work with, but there will also be a lot that you would have learned that maybe don't come up every single day when you're working, and so those might kind of drift to the back burner. You might remember the concepts without remembering the names. So don't think that if you're struggling with this, it means that you're going to be like a bad social worker. Absolutely not. Dear Anna, how did you take notes / stay organized while getting your MSW, and do you ever look back at your notes now that you're in the field? I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose with all the information we get. I guess that's kind of related to last one. I will link a video where I show my notes from when I was like actually in grad school, because I explained it better then because I was actually doing it then. It'll depend honestly on your type of learning, which is a bummer, because if you don't know your type of learning, then it can feel like a adjustment, a learning curve until you figure that out. Something that helped me while I was in grad school, granted I had an online setup, which is different than some people's setups, but I would have like video lectures during the week and readings during the week. I wouldn't take that many notes on readings, like the articles and all of that, unless there was something that was just so interesting to me and really stuck out, and then I might jot it down. I would take notes on the lectures. The notes that I would take though would be things that would be like memorization facts. I wouldn't write down like different connections or discussion professors are having, but if they were listing like, you know, these are the 3 signs of, I don't know, my brain literally cannot do examples apparently tonight. These are the 3 signs of this thing, then I would be like, oh, okay, signs of this thing, 1, 2, 3, but then I wouldn't necessarily write notes on all that they say about it, because that becomes a lot, I feel like. I have referenced back my notes. I feel like I have recently, and I'm trying to think why. I don't all the time. I definitely don't all the time. I have before. I think the times that they may come up will be like in the future, if you're like stuck on a case, like you're working with a client and you're like, I'm not sure exactly what to do, or like, I think this kind of jogs my memory of something I've learned, then sometimes notes can be helpful to go back to and be like, oh yes, this is what I learned. But just like I said with the last question, if you don't retain the entire fire hose of information, that is okay, and that does not mean that you're going to make a bad social worker. Kind of like I mentioned before, my favorite answer to a question is, I'm not sure, let me check on that and I'll get back to you. It is so fine to reference things back. And once you learn all the things, it becomes a lot more easy, I feel like, to Google and like actually like jog your memory that way. I feel like you can't learn everything in grad school just from like Google searches, you know, have like the deeper understanding and all of that. But once you go through grad school, you can be like, what was that thing I was thinking about again? Type it up and you'll find it. So in short, I guess tips are working with your learning style, whatever that may be, be. Do what you can to get through your classes in grad school. And there are so many learning opportunities even once you're outside of school, like when you start getting continuing education units and all of those things. If you feel like you need to brush up on something, you can find a continuing education unit and like take that. You're gonna need them anyways to renew your license, and so like you can pick and choose what you learn about. And with my continuing education units, I do not always take ones that are like specifically relevant to my job. Like today I took one that was about domestic violence. Like recently I took one about anxiety related school avoidance in high schoolers. Like that doesn't have to do with my current job, but you definitely continue to learn after you graduate. So I think I veered off from the question, but I hope that was helpful. And that, my friends, is all that we have for today. Now that it's like an hour long, that's it. Don't worry. If you want more videos like this, definitely let me know. It was fun. If you're watching this video, you are going to make such a great social worker. The fact that you are taking time out of your day to watch a video that's related to social work, like you are dedicated. You are a dedicated person. You are going to be awesome. You already are awesome. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend some time with me. Thanks for submitting your questions so that this video could even be made, and I'll see you next time.